Looking to boost your financial modeling skills? The Advanced Financial Modeler Accreditation is designed to help you strengthen and validate your financial modeling skills. In the AFM program, you will become an expert at building a world class three statement financial model of a company from scratch. Learn more by visiting fminstitute.com today.
Welcome to Compound Insights, a podcast by CFA Society New York. I'm your host, Rob Rowan. Today we're talking about upcoming and current presentations and research materials from CFA Institute so that you can get a little bit of leg up and start thinking about what you might want to read this summer. We're talking with Paul Andrews. Paul oversees the strategic direction and leadership of the Research, Advocacy, and Standards area of CFA Institute. Prior to joining the Institute, Paul was Secretary General of the International Organization of Securities Commissions. Before that, he was at FINRA. Prior to joining FINRA, Paul spent 8 years at the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. He is a graduate of Catholic University School of Law in Washington, D.C., and Villanova University. So, welcome back to the podcast, and thanks again for telling members about what's upcoming.
Thanks, Rob. It's a real pleasure to be with you, and look forward to these sessions. So thank you.
Yeah, so the first publication, which is currently available to members of CFA Institute on CFA Institute's website, is The Economics of Private Equity, a critical review. And I thought this one was really interesting and also very well timed because there are a lot of issues floating around private equity right now. So could you tell us a little bit about it, please?
Would love to, and thanks for asking about this one because this report for us is a really important one in the sense that it is part of a series of papers that we're doing with respect to private markets in particular, because this asset class has become so big and is growing day in and day out. And it's one of the focus areas for us at the Research and Policy Center here at CFA Institute for this year. Now, specifically with this paper, because so many institutional investors are allocating significant portions of their portfolio to private equity, what we did in this paper, it was really a review of what happens when private equity funds acquire mature companies. And it's things like, the fund performance, value creation, other key aspects that investors would be thinking about or concerned about with respect to the PE funds. And just to take one or two of them, like with performance, for instance, PE funds typically have outperformed public market indices once you take into account fees. But the question really is, does the outperformance persist when you adjust for risk, for leverage, for illiquidity? And it's complicated and difficult, in large part because these markets are somewhat opaque and they're illiquid by the very nature. And this report goes into a great deal of depth on this. And it's a key part of what we're working on for this year.
Yeah, and not to scoop it too much, but there is a section at the end that's just about the LP's perspective, which is
That's
actually quite rare in these things.
it's so true. And what's nice about this is last week, in fact, we just issued a report on some of the governance challenges with respect to general partners and limited partners. And it's based on a survey of CFA Institute members. And we drew some conclusions in that report. So it's a nice companion piece to the private equity uh, research piece that we're talking about here.
Yeah. So for those of you who even work in private equity, there are some portions of this that I think will be extremely interesting to read. If you don't, you're thinking about getting into it. This is a real good way to think about getting on the ground floor. Well, so let's move on now because there are also, I really enjoyed this one that I'd like to talk about. This is factor mimicking portfolios for climate risk. I thought this one was fascinating. So please tell the members about that.
Yeah, this is another one that is so interesting, and in large part because we are doing again a lot of work in the area of sustainability, and there's so many aspects to sustainability. And what was interesting about this one is that this paper really proposes a way to hedge climate change risk. And what the authors did in this one is they created some indices through textual analysis of newspapers. And they took the information, it's a lot of unstructured data, and they tried to look at what would happen if they mimic portfolios to build a climate risk hedge portfolio. And it's in their view, at least, the approach that they put forward is much more efficient than what's traditionally done with sorting or maximum correlation approaches and things like that. And they really took into account some of the new methodologies that are estimating things like large dimensional covariance and demonstrating what the performance would be and things of that nature. So, really, an interesting paper, and really encourage people to look at it, particularly if you're interested in this area of climate change and sustainability. And the nice thing about the paper as well is it's again part of a stack of work that we're doing when it comes to sustainability in the Research and Policy Center.
Yeah, I also think this is a good paper for people to look at who maybe aren't as confident in the ways and means of AI and other types of application of technology than they might otherwise be, because this is a nice on ramp to it. Now,
So true. And if you think about climate risk, it's something that's very difficult to insure against, but investors want to hedge against it in some way. And this presents some ideas about how to do that.
yeah, yeah. So that one's definitely a good one. Another thing that's along the lines of quant slash fintech world is building large language models in the open source community, and this is a call to action. So, so please tell us about that.
Well, this is also one of the areas where we're looking in some detail this year with respect to artificial intelligence and machine learning. And certainly, what these large language models have done is, in some ways, they've democratized access to these technologies, and they allow the delivery of tools and knowledge with respect to more sophisticated techniques and scalability and things of that nature. And recently, we did a report that took some unstructured data in social media posts and applied it to ESG, and trying to understand how large language models could actually take that data and really understand what was happening in the ESG area. And somewhat sophisticated. It really is a case study, is the way I guess I would put it. And it's trying to define and identify ESG disclosures from these social media feeds. And it's really ripe for artificial intelligence, and it's our first foray into looking at these two areas of unstructured data and ESG disclosures.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that is exceptionally interesting because, of course, there is a part of the ESG revolution that is basically growing from the ground up now, going from the court of public opinion up.
That's exactly right. And one of the areas we're also going to explore this year that I think your listeners would be interested in is we're going to do a series of papers on how artificial intelligence, including large language models, are impacting the workflow of investment professionals. How are they using these technologies? How are they using these techniques? And really trying to educate as best we can others about these new technologies.
Yeah, that's a great topic. I've been asking lots of folks on this podcast about how they actually use these things. Not to talk about an esoteric sense, but how do you actually use them? And it's amazing. It goes from basically taking sort of the edge off a big data set to writing a better dear client letter.
That's right. And so far, our experience has been as many firms are proceeding cautiously because so much is changing so quickly in this area that what we know today may not be true tomorrow. And it's important to stay abreast of these developments because they can be very powerful tools.
Yeah, I think they are letting it out into the ecosystem a little bit on some portions of their business customer service. I don't know if you've chatted with your bank lately, but that's not a person.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, chatbots now are becoming almost table stakes for many businesses as a way to screen uh, routine inquiries and things of that nature. And those have been around for a while, but they're becoming more and more sophisticated in ways that I'm not sure we would have envisioned a few years ago.
Yeah, they can give you a link to the thing you actually want instead of the thing that's near
That's
what you wanted.
exactly right. And what's nice about these large language models, with all of this new information and this data, it gives users an opportunity to customize their research by slicing and dicing the data, looking for patterns, looking for discrepancies, particularly if you're thinking about performance issues. it's a great tool. It's a real help in so many ways.
I would like to ask in a second, what you all have coming so people can start to get ready for that. But before that, I just would like to point out that CFA Institute has a couple of certificates that go right around these topics, right? And one of them is the ESG one is exceptionally important.
That's exactly right, and that's probably our longest held certificate. We've had it in the market now for about 4 years. We issued recently or put out a climate certificate similar to that. We have on the earlier paper that you mentioned. There's a private market certificate, and we just put out a private equity certificate. So we're trying to be research and education really together because these are the important topics facing the industry. We want to try to be as helpful to participants, to members, to the investing public to the extent that we can.
Yeah, and for a while there, I don't know if this is still true, but for a while there, CFA New York members were the largest uptake of the ESG certificate. So just like to wave the flag for that. so let's talk about what's next. What do you all have in the pipeline that's good people can see on the website pretty soon?
Well, for this year, we are focused on three key, I would say, content areas. One is around sustainability, as we've been talking about, also on digital transformation. So that's AI and Gen AI. And then the third area is what we're calling capital formation or the end of cheap money, for lack of a better term. So let me take that one first. We're writing now in the final stages of a two-part series on tokenization. And it's not only how tokenization actually works in terms of it's what the basics of it, like how do you tokenize an asset, but then looking down further and coming forward with some real use cases and how it actually works in real life, and from that forming some policy recommendations and some policy views. And it's a very interesting project because this is an area that's becoming more and more prevalent in asset owners, asset managers, high net worth individuals' portfolios. So we thought we would be able to do some interesting work in this area.
Great. I just want to add to any of you who are subscribers to the podcast. Last week, you will have heard an interview that I did with someone who works at JP Morgan on their tokenization platform. So that was actually really interesting to hear what they're doing with it.
Right. It's an area that just I think is going to continue to grow and grow and grow. One of the other things we're working on is around indexing and looking at smart beta products, excuse me, and direct indexing. And this is an area that's becoming bigger and bigger too, because with high net worth family offices, with others, there's a real thirst and an ability today with technology to do direct indexing as opposed to buying a fund and things of that nature. So we thought that would be something we could contribute in terms of some knowledge and education and things of that nature. So that's sort of on the capital markets area. When it comes to sustainability, we're going to do a little work soon in the coming months. I'd say probably towards the end of the summer, maybe the early autumn, on carbon markets and really understanding and trying to really come to grips with how carbon markets could be an effective tool for trying to solve the net zero problem. And we're not preachy about it. We're not saying you must do it, you should do it. We're saying if you choose to pursue a net zero strategy, if carbon markets are part of your approach, here are ways to be looking at carbon markets and really provide some guidance and some resources. That's really what we're trying to do there.
Great. And you said that'll be ready in the fall sometime,
That's
or
the goal would be towards the end of the summer, but just given the summer slowdown and whatnot, we're thinking probably in the early autumn here in the U.S.
right, right. That's one of the things. But I guess you're also working under the deadline that UN's Climate Week is the third week of September. so,
That's exactly right. We're
so
trying to get these things out. And in a similar way, we're doing something somewhat unique too, is where another paper we're working on is around climate stress testing and what the contagion channels are with climate and stress testing. And we haven't really seen anything along these lines recently, and we thought this is something where we can really add some value to the industry because stress testing is important, climate is important, and then how do you put these two things together in a way that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a really tough thing for a lot of analysts to get their arms around is how you combine those things. Sometimes they're relatively combined for you. Say, analysts who cover, I don't know, maybe general obligation debt of cities.
Yeah,
It's exceptionally
yeah.
obvious there. Less so when you get into from on the macroeconomic side that affects countries or even supranationals.
Exactly right. And this is a paper that we thought would appeal to our regulatory audience as well as our practitioner audience. Because both sides are sort of grappling with these issues. And we thought because of our ability to be neutral and not, we don't have a commercial interest, that we could provide some thoughtful ideas in this area.
Okay, well, that's exciting. So I hope members have all heard it. We got three things for you to read this summer. So download it now onto your iPad and take it out to the beach. Thank you to Paul Andrews for being here again and giving everyone a little scoop.
Thank you, Rob.
All right. And until next time, I'm Rob Rowan, and this has been Compound Insights.